Hi, Bonner here again, and the reason why I began this episode with Antonio Carlos Jobim's Wave is that it has a tremendous number of very beautiful chords in it. And this is a characteristic of his compositional style, and in general a style that's very, very common in bossa nova, is to employ stepwise motion. In other words, very, very small steps from one chord to the next. In order to do that, we have to have, in order to be able to play that, we have to, or write it, we have to have a pretty robust vocabulary of chords. So I want to talk about chords a little bit more today, and put a tool in your hands that you will find very, very helpful for understanding chords and putting them into context as you're learning different songs. And also this tool will help you to recognize the different songs. But one of the things I wanted, the reason why I chose to play that song partly is because I have a student guitar here that one of my students brought to me to be restrung and tidied up a little bit. And this guitar is from the Mexican town of Paracho. Now, Paracho is considered to be the guitar building capital of the world. So if you're ever going to Mexico, have a look at the map, find your way to Paracho if you're at all interested in guitar. There's an entire street of handmade lutherie shops where you can buy beautiful handmade guitar from very, very reasonable prices, I believe in the range of about $100 US. Right through to the sky's the limit, depending on how fancy you want to go. And this particular guitar is from Paracho. It's from the shop of Juan Manuel Martinez Govea. So you can check their shop out if you make your way to Paracho in Mexico, the guitar building capital of the world. So that's our interesting story about the guitar. What I wanted to talk about is this diagram that I have here, and that you're gonna see on your screen now. We have this diagram was introduced in our episode, I believe 24, where we're talking about magical arpeggios and understanding the notes that are in chords. So this diagram is called the chord spelling circle, and what I'm going to do is again just take you through the chord spelling circle so that you understand all the chords that exist in any given major key signature. Okay, so here we'll switch to diagram number 2. And here we are in diagram 2. And for today's purposes, we're not going to really work on the arpeggios so much. We're just going to work on the chord triads. So I'm going to just talk about those first 3 notes that build the core of each chord on this circle. So when we start on the first one, we take the note C, we skip D, we take E and G, and we have C, E, G. And that is the spelling of the C major chord, which is the first chord that occurs on the spelling circle when we're in the key of C major. If we go to the next one, the next chord that exists starts on the note D. We skip the next note, which is E, we go to F, and then we skip the next note, and then we go to A, and we have D, F, A. And as it turns out, and we're going to come back to this concept, but as it turns out, D, F, and A spells the chord D minor. If we go to the third one, now we're on to the next diagram. Now we're going to take the E, we're going to skip the F, the G, skip the A, and we'll grab the B. E, G, and B are the 3 notes of that triad, and you can see what I'm doing is I'm taking every second note around the circle, just as we did in episode 24. And as it turns out, the spelling E, G, and B spells the chord E minor. We go to chord 4, number 4. Now we're on our next diagram, and you can see we've taken the notes F, skip a note and take A, skip a note and take C. So we've got every second note starting at F, and that spells F, A, C. And as it turns out, that happens to spell F major. Now we'll go to our next diagram. We're going to add the G chord at the 5. And the G chord, we're going to add the G, the B, and the D. And that spells a G major. Now I will point out that from a music theory perspective, we always describe the 5 chord as the dominant chord and it's usually considered in music to be the complete four-note or tetrad, the four-noted chord. So we take that, the G, the B, the D, and the F. And the F is the flat 7 of the G chord, and so that gives us a G7. However, strictly speaking, we can use either the three-note version, the triad, or the four-note version in that position, the 7 chord. Now we go on to our next diagram, step 6, and we're going to take the A, the C, and the E, and that's what makes up the 6th chord. The A, the C, and the E happens to spell A minor. And then we'll go to the very last chord, number 7, on our next diagram, and we've got a B, a D, and an F. And as it turns out, when we have B, D, and F, that makes up something called a diminished chord. A diminished chord is a kind of a minor chord with a flat 5. So it's, I'll talk about the recipes for these chords a little bit. I don't want to get down a rabbit hole here. Okay, so now we have these 7 chord spellings, and I'm putting this completed handout as a download that you can grab out of the description of this video. So what you have here is you have the spellings of these 7 chords. Now, strictly speaking, because we're in the key of C, we have no sharps and flats, and it's really useful for you to begin to be a little bit familiar with these chord spellings, because they are the 7 chord spellings that exist in all music. Okay, there are no other triads because there's only 7 notes. So really, all the triads that exist are on this page in front of you, believe it or not. So the only difference that you will see sometimes is some of the notes in these triads will be sharpened or flattened. But basically, these are the 7 diatonic spellings that exist. If we begin to get familiar with them, it's very helpful to us because we start to recognize the triads. So this worksheet is something that it's really worthwhile to sort of print it out and put it on the wall of where you study music, because you will begin to absorb these 7 chord spellings, and we run into them over and over and over again. As we look at this diagram, I filled in the chord types that occur at each degree of the major scale. And this is kind of the magical consistency of harmonization of the major scale. And that's what the chord spelling circle is, simply a diagram of the harmonization of the major scale, turning each note into a diatonic harmony, which gives us the chords of the major scale. When we do that on the major scale, the chord type that occurs at each degree will always be the same, no matter what key signature we're in. So when we look at the diagram now, you'll see that on the 1, I've got a major chord, okay, a C major. At the 2 position, I've got a D minor. At the 3 position, I've got a E minor, okay? And so on around the circle. The 4 is an F major, 5 is a G major or G7, 6 is an A minor, 7 is a B diminished. So what's important is if we can take those letters out, but the remaining chord type will stay the same no matter what key signature we are in. Okay, so for example, if I'm in the key of G, then 1 will be a G, okay? And 2 will be an A minor, and 3 will be a B minor. We already know that because we know that the chord types at each degree will stay the same according to this standard formula. 1 is always major, 2 is always minor, 3 is always minor, 4 is always major. It's an interesting and very, very useful piece of information that's on this diagram that we want to get familiar with, because it helps us to understand what chords we're going to see in a given key signature. I just wanted to introduce those 2 ideas to you today. Number 1, that there really are only 7 triad chord spellings, and here they are in the key of C. You will see different versions of them with sharps or flats in different positions depending on what key signature you're in. But the letter combinations of the fundamental triads never change. There are only 7 notes in the major scale. So as a consequence, there are only 7 chord spelling possibilities for us. And then the second concept that I wanted to introduce is this idea that once we build diatonic harmony from the, it always gives us the same result no matter what key signature we're in. The chords that occur at different degrees will always be the same. The chord that's built on the root of the major scale will always be a major chord. The chord that's built on the 2nd degree of the major scale will always be a minor chord, and so on as we go around the circle. So these are just a couple more chord concepts. We're going to use these chord concepts as we go forward, and I'm going to put together another arpeggio practice exercise for you, and we'll talk about some of these different chords that we've introduced here. And so that's all that I have today, except to tell you to, if you go to Mexico, go and visit Paracho and buy yourself a nice Mexican-built, hand-built guitar. And in the meantime, practice on whatever guitar you have handy, and I'll talk to you soon.